All right, Brian, thank you so much for coming on today. Why don't we just start by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, right now I'm a venture capitalist. I've been doing this for 35 years and still having a good time at it. I get bored easily, but not with this. And it's because it's a very challenging field. Um, Despite the fact that you're highly selective in what you do and you do the best to do it, you fail a major number of times, almost half the time. So it maintains itself as a fun kind of challenge. I think one of the things that I like best about it are the exciting people that I interface with. So that's a lot of fun. And I'm not too sure whether you want me to go into my background as to how I got into this or where I came from.
Absolutely. Let's unpack it all. Let's learn everything there is.
So I grew up in a little town in New Jersey, and my whole life was football, basketball, baseball. I figured that's right after having wanting to be a fireman, I decided I wanted to be a baseball or football player, and went on to college where actually I played all three sports. So it was years when you could do that. It was not easy, but it was in the early '60s. When I got out of school, I did the traditional kind of thing in those years and took a job with a large company. So started with a telephone company, New York telephone company, in sales, and I got promoted pretty quickly to sales manager. I was a sales manager at 22 years old, the youngest in the Bell system. But I wasn't really satisfied and figured I had so much stuff I didn't know. And despite the fact that I got married right out of school, and then a year later we got our first child, decided to go back to school. And that's actually where I met your grandfather at Harvard Business School. And after a couple of years there, got out working with a medical products company, and got intrigued with a doctor who was a potential customer of ours, guy who was in charge of cardiovascular research at the NIH. And he came up with an idea on ways that you might save people from dying of heart attack. Most of the people that die of heart attack die before they get to the hospital. And he had an idea of a system of devices that you could use to prevent death. And I got intrigued, and he needed a business person, and so joined him. So I was one of the first, or three or four of us that really started the company. So I was all of a sudden an entrepreneur at a time when that was not very fashionable. Actually, even though it's somewhat fashionable today, an entrepreneur was had a very negative connotation.
Yeah, could you dive into that? You touch on it a little bit in your book that I know that's going to come out soon. But why in this time period was it kind of controversial to be an entrepreneur?
I think people looked at it as kind of a default place to go for people that couldn't get a good job, work for the bank, or work for the telephone company. They'd start their own business, and it was kind of it kind of meant running a shoe repair or pizza shop or something like that. It had, I remember being at Harvard that professors said there was one course in entrepreneurship, when they stayed away from the word. It's called Management of New Enterprises. But they were pretty overt in saying this is not what you're being trained to do. You're supposed to run Fortune 500 companies, and you're not supposed to do these little startups.
Do you think today at Harvard Business School that perspective has changed?
Totally. Matter of fact, it's a required course. I now understand in the first year, entrepreneurship, which is amazing, and there must be 15 or 20 different offerings in the 2-year period. Stanford, that probably has, even has twice that many. So it's kind of where when I graduated, kind of going into consulting, um, or with a large company was kind of the thing to do. I would say it's, you know, right up there as one of the number one things to do, which of course usually spells, well, once it becomes the number one thing to do in Harvard Business School, kind of spells the death of it about to come, I think, sometime.
Yeah. One thing that's been kind of interesting, and I think a lot of our listeners can relate to this, is when you go work for those big companies right out of school, it's a very secure job. You have your health care, you have your 401k, and it's safe. And, when you kind of go out on your own, obviously that element of risk kind of comes into the picture. And do you think that that's also part of the stigma back in the 60s and 70s with the entrepreneurship? Like it was just an unsecured, unvalidated route to go?
But pretty much, I would say, I remember my father was completely appalled at the whole idea. Now, he had worked for Republic Steel for some 40 years, and they did take care of you cradle to grave and all of the benefits, etc. And to do a startup sounded insane to him. Of course, today, as we know, I think, essentially the security is in your own talent base. So people move from job to job, and their skills are what are the security net. The companies no longer feel a loyalty, nor does the employee feel a loyalty to a company to a lifetime there. So without making a value judgment, it's maybe a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is. But in those days, it was pretty scary to go out on your own. Yeah. And as I got into it, I learned, this was scary.
Yeah. So you kind of stumble into this entrepreneurial career with this medical, backed venture. What kind of happened next? Where did you, what was your next steps? Where did you grow this opportunity?
So, like happens with many ventures, we developed the technology to use in the setting of a heart attack, and that technology involved developing a small device about the size of a pack of cigarettes that you could send your electrocardiogram over the phone on. That was a major feat because the integrated circuit wasn't available at that time. And you really had to make a custom integrated circuit. I had worked my way in and networked up to the president of ITT, Harold Janine at the time, and as kind of a PR move, convinced him that it would be a good thing to do a good thing for healthcare, and got him to agree to make a custom circuit for a pretty bargain basement price. We also had to develop injectors where people could take an injection of an antiarrhythmic drug in the setting of heart attack. It turns out that we didn't really have the money, that system probably worked out, but we didn't really have the money to do a very extensive and expensive clinical trial. And so we used a shorter version of it. And so it did not prove to be statistically significant. But from that, we used that same technology, though, to develop the EpiPen, which I think a lot of people know. And that's for people that are having an anaphylactic reaction to a bee sting or food, can take an injection. That's now $1 billion product. Mm-hmm. So that and a lot of other products did well. We did an IPO, took it public. And then I got a call from a recruiter to come to a Fortune 500 company. And I was kind of ready to go. I had done this for 10 years or so. And I wondered what it would be like to go with a big Fortune 500 company. So I ran one of the divisions. I made some major changes there. And also quarterbacked really a major acquisition of Revlon's healthcare business, and putting those two together, and then was made president of the company. So I remember being petrified going with a large company, figuring it would be overwhelming. But I really found out that the entrepreneurial lessons that I learned were extremely valuable with a large company. I found large companies basically looked at doing improvements on current activities, make things 20% better. But they didn't think of whole new ideas or major strategic moves.
Why do you think they focus on those kind of benchmarks? Is it because it's easy to report to your shareholders? Because when you're a large company like that, obviously that's who you answer to, or does the risk of innovation and trying to do something just kind of scare people off because it could be a waste of money and resources?
I think that it's a natural thing to do what you're doing better is easier than doing whole new things and carries less risk. I also do think the risk reward is out of line. If you take a look today at the venture business, if in fact you're working in a venture and it works out, it can be worth millions and millions of dollars. If it doesn't work out, but you've gone at it properly, you can go on to the next opportunity. In the large company, if something works out, you probably get a 5% raise. If it doesn't, you could get fired. So I think, there's an attitude almost in many of the larger companies, and it's not easy to break, I would call it, instead of trying to win, it's a little bit more of a not losing attitude. So you try not to be associated with a project that doesn't work out. In the entrepreneurial community, really the second best answer to success is failing fast. So hanging on and is really not a good strategy. You're better to move on to the next one. Plenty of opportunity, not enough good people to do it. Yeah. So I think there's a general bias. If I was to run my large company again, I'd probably get rid of all the research and I'd do it all with small companies because the productivity level is significantly higher. And actually, there's a lot of data around to show that particularly in the pharmaceutical area, the number of inventions coming out of the small biotech is much higher dollar for dollar than major pharma.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's actually kind of funny that you mentioned that because we've talked about on this show quite a few times the idea of being an entrepreneur. And yes. It is, being the entrepreneur within the business. And we have a lot of listeners that I think are looking for opportunities to be entrepreneurs because they work at these large corporations. And sure, the idea of quitting it all and going to run your startup sounds awesome. And, but for a lot of people, it's not realistic. So looking for opportunities of ownership within your big company and kind of like you said, looking for new ideas and trying to innovate, it's a really attractive option. And the added benefit too is the resources of your large company enable you to do things that, the other guy who is bootstrapped for cash right now with a short runway can't do. So I definitely think in the smaller biotech firms, like you just kind of talked about, there are a lot of, entrepreneurs that are doing really cool, innovative stuff, because they can, and they have ownership in that. And that's probably why there's such a high volume of great products coming out of it. Right.
And it's very difficult in a large company to have a culture, to change the culture and the economics for that matter. You may have one little tiny division that's doing something really cool could generate a value more than what the CEO makes, which makes for awkwardness. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So. When you came into this large pharmaceutical company and you talked about quarterbacking the acquisition and kind of moving up that way, were you being an entrepreneur in that situation? Were you kind of running that as its own company?
I would say so. It was I was running one of three divisions and then was promoted to executive VP and put in charge of strategic planning. and one of my thoughts was that we really only had enough assets to do two businesses well, for reasons I won't bore you with. And therefore, we should look at trading one of them so that we could augment our activities in one of the other two. And the one I selected was really the product that started the company. So it was kind of the grandfather product. So I thought I would get pretty negative feedback from the board, but did not. There was pretty good concurrence. That strategic move enabled me, when an opportunity came up, to actually do that. And it turned out the business that I wanted to sell was the grandfather business, the old business, but it turned out the business I was running was the one that needed to be sold. So I was in a position where if I pulled this off, I could be out of a job. But I figured, no, if I can pull this off and it works well, someone will want me somewhere. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the entrepreneurial skills that you acquired before that you were able to implement that kind of, eventually led to the sale? And obviously you had to do something right if that was the exit that you had, and then eventually moving up to executive.
I think the idea of looking outside the business that you're in, being awake to opportunities. So this is one that was it was in the context of an unfriendly takeover of Revlon, and there were two bidders for Revlon. And I remember one day reading in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, you needed both to get the story together, that essentially one of the acquirers was buying the business but had all of its pieces sold. And the business that they were going to continue to run was the healthcare one. So if you just did the math and deducted it, the healthcare one was grossly undervalued. So I went to the competitive company that was offering for it and said, I'll tell you what, we'll buy that healthcare part. And made an offer, and that enabled that company then to up its bid and actually win the prize. So it was a fairly heroic effort, but one that really worked out well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So so that sale happens, you move into the executive role, and then ultimately after your journey with that business, you eventually moved into venture capital, correct? Why don't you talk a little bit about that transition? Why would you go from being a exec at a large company into kind of reverting back to the entrepreneurial startup world? What kind of went through your mind there?
I think that my great goal and desire was to run a large company. And then when I got there, it was kind of disappointing in a way. It was the journey that was the fun. Being there was difficult. And, I remember thinking that, people talked about bureaucracy and problems in the large company. I figured, well, if you're at the top, you can get away from that. I quickly learned that you're kind of in charge of it. To some extent, trying to get rid of policies and procedures, trying to generate an entrepreneurial atmosphere was extraordinarily difficult. There were, incidents. I'll never forget one day in a situation where we had a serious problem with our German operation. I was on the phone with the managing director there at 6 at night, midnight his time. And in comes one of the top executives, says, I've got to talk to you, Brian. And I said, well, can it wait? We've got this huge problem in Germany. No, I can't wait. So I said to the German manager, can I call you back? I realize it's late. I apologize. He said, that's all right. So I said, okay, so Dan, what's the problem? He said, I just don't understand why my parking spot is further away from the HR vice president when I've been here longer. And that, along with a whole bunch of other little incidents like that, endless meetings about things that made no difference. My wife had the best example of that. She said, I don't know what's going on at work, but you keep hitting your snooze bar in the morning. I figured I've got to find something where I don't hit the snooze bar.
Absolutely.
And so I decided to leave. I spent about 6 months figuring out what I'm going to do next. The goal being non-snooze bar hitting. And I discovered venture capital. I hadn't really heard or much about it. But as I looked around, it was just ideal. I did not want to be an entrepreneur again. And I didn't want to run the large company, but I love the entrepreneurial spirit. But the ups and downs, and being an entrepreneur, I did not want to do again. Mm-hmm. So I found this, and instead of having to fix the broiler anymore, you could just dispense advice and experience on how to fix the broiler. That's a venture
There you go. I think when you're when you go down the VC route, you have one of the most unique perspectives when it comes to entrepreneurship, because you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and other people go through it. And then reflecting back on your own experiences as being one, like you kind of said, you really can relate and give great advice. And I think a lot of our listeners are always interested in, when they come up with an idea, and, eventually there comes the point where they want to go out and raise capital, and venture capital always comes up in that. So, one thing I like to ask VCs when they come on is, what are some of the things that stick out to you about entrepreneurs when they, are coming to talk to you?
To me, to see that, their commitment, their attitude, their will to win. They don't always come with all the skills, because a lot of them are young. They may or may not have them, but they can learn the skills. If they come with a bad attitude, I've lost more money with people with great skills, Nobel Prize winners wanting to start a company, but with bad attitudes. I can do this on the side, that aren't committed, versus people that are really committed, and work as a team, or willing to work with people and work well with people. Particularly working down. I find when I do due diligence on people, I spend more time asking people who work for them, and spend almost no time on people that were their boss. In fact, I almost find it the other way. The extent to which they're quote unquote hard to manage, probably the more likely they're to be successful as entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So I think having been there is helpful to me. I have empathy for what they're going through. People don't realize how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. Simple tasks like, why don't you just call so-and-so and get this done? You don't recognize that you're calling people who've never heard of you, that won't answer your call, how hard it is to even do the smallest things. Mm-hmm. And you can't understand that until you've been there. When the cleaning lady doesn't show up, you got to fix it. So it's, and I think that entrepreneurs should look and do a lot more diligence on venture capitalists. They should look at the track record of, do they panic? Are they helpful, or are they there to criticize? I really think our job is to help. It's not governance. You can get somebody to do the governance. Um, but it's somebody that really understands what you're going through and can help you through it.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because I think when people are talking about VCs, all they think about is like, oh, I have to do all these things right to get pitched and then to get their investment. But in reality, that is such a small component of the relationship you have with the VC, because once you enter into that agreement, it's a 3 to 5 year, maybe even longer, hopefully, relationship. And that's kind of where the help and the nurturing comes in. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you as a VC do for entrepreneurs once you have invested in them and want to kind of embark on that journey with them?
Right. Well, I think there's this sadly this perception that if you've got a good enough business plan and you got a great pitch that you can do on the elevator, that Shark Tank is kind of the enemy of reality in a way.
Yeah. Do you think Shark Tank has totally misconstrued people's ideas when it comes to pitching and sharing the business?
I think what it has done is put an emphasis on the idea. And if you can just make a good pitch on the idea, it's kind of downhill from there. Mm-hmm. My thesis is that, and actually the name of my book is called The Idea is the Easy Part. So the perception is if you've got a great idea, really breakthrough idea, you got a great pitch, and you get the money, you're on the 20-yard line. And I guess my conclusion is, you're on the 20-yard line, but it's your own 20. You got 80 to go. And that's really where it is. So I think these perceptions are can be very dangerous. In fact, if you take a look at some of the successful companies, the ideas are either average. For example, Five Guys is making hamburgers. It's kind of an average idea, but just beautifully executed. Peloton, and why would you want to ride a bike in your basement watching TV instead of outside? It's an okay idea for some people. And take Zappos, selling shoes on the internet is probably a bad idea, made good by great execution. So I think that's that's something that, and I think entrepreneurs can look for that. We were involved in Invisalign, the line early on, two very young people straight out of school, and I think we were together with Kleiner Perkins, worked with these people, and there was a lot that we could help on. There were contacts that we had in industry, international contacts. We kind of supplemented the management team, and also were mentors to the entrepreneurs. And that's what you deserve from the venture capitalists. There are misperceptions in both ways, perceptions that venture capitalists are out to, really take advantage of you, which really isn't the case. And the reason for that is it's not only not nice, it's not pragmatic. You've got a 5, 6, 7, 8 year partnership you're going to go together with. And if you're able to get a really good deal from the entrepreneur, they're going to find that out in a year or two from then. They're going to be totally demotivated. So this is a partnership, and both sides have to work at it. So,
we have some members in our community, some listeners that are backed by VCs, and we have some that are going through the process right now of pitching them. So what are some examples of things that you should lean on your VC to talk through? What are some of the items or the thoughts that you should run by your VC? Maybe go to them if as a resource.
Is this while you're raising the money or after you've got the money?
Both. I think that I think VCs can benefit you at both stages potentially.
Yeah, I would say as you're going out there, first of all, really do your homework to figure out who really fits with what it is that you're trying to do. Who has done similar type situations? when I see business proposals and it says, copy number 1182, highly confidential, I immediately hit the delete button. So you need to network in, you should understand a lot of the story that I've told you is something that you can read probably on our website. People should read those. They should know them. They should see that wow, this is interesting. He's been through what I'm about to go through. And look at the track record and try to, you're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs, unfortunately, to get the money, but you want to try to have a really targeted approach and one in which you network into. That's really important. It's important to talk to companies that the venture capitalist is involved in, has been involved in. Find out, does the guy panic? What's he like when the going gets tough? How much help did he give you? Where does he give you the help? So I think that's, those are important elements. I think the really good entrepreneurs, pick their VCs. It's not the other way around. And, given what I said before, Peyton, about this being a 5, 6, 7, 8 year partnership, just getting the money is not really going to be good enough. I really would take a worse deal to do it with, with a top flight VC that could help me. So if I was out looking for money, let's say I started today as an entrepreneur, given that I'm a liberal arts graduate, I would be looking for somebody that knows a lot about technology, somebody that knows a lot of stuff I don't know, somebody that maybe has worked internationally a lot more than I have. So, look for somebody that's compatible, but also value added.
Mm-hmm. I think when you're building out your founding team, you're bringing on your advisors, right? You're bringing those people on to address gaps in your skill set and understanding that you have. And, kind of based on what you just said right there, it sounds like the VC could also come in and help fill that gap.
Yes. And it's tough. Above all, don't get discouraged because the volume, I think we at Domain, we look at like 1,500 deals a year. We do 7. So it's we're not right. I think that the thing that I try to focus on most when we want to be critical of ourselves is not so much where you failed, because companies can fail for many, many, many reasons. But looking at those deals we didn't do. And that's really where the money is. We probably lost more money by turning deals down that we should have done than we have by losing money.
Wow, that's powerful.
Passing up on a 10x is 10 times more expensive than losing the 1x.
Yeah, no, that's that's when you're in the reverse volume game, which I guess you guys are, right? You guys are a funnel, not a spreader. Then you're definitely going to have you have to be very selective, and you have to hope you're making the right choice. And sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't.
It's true.
But you have to, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you gotta step out and take a chance on some of those for sure.
And Brian, it's rarely that you've made a great choice that has spelled success. It's I think we looked at our data at Domain at one point in time. Something like 56% of the successful companies did not practice the game plan that we were presented originally. So it's quite amazing.
Wow. That is insane. That's insane to think about. Brian, the last question that we always like to ask our guests is, it's a simple one, and you've been around this world for a long time, so I'm excited to hear your answer, but simply, why are you an entrepreneur?
I guess it's kind of a lifestyle. It goes back to the the excitement of working with really brilliant scientists that you see, entrepreneurs who are very exciting, who they're not all, that's another misperception. They're not all extroverts, extreme extroverts. There are a lot of introverts, but they all have multiple interests. You can talk to them about history, art, sports, whatever. They're multi-talented, so it's working with those people that's so much fun. And in running down these opportunities, and to some extent, in a perverse kind of way, the failure rate is so high that you don't get bored. I don't get bored. It's kind of like baseball. A good baseball player is batting 300. Well, hopefully we bat better than 300, but we sure don't bat 1,000. That's for sure, and we fail a lot, and that keeps the juices going. So it's a very exciting business. I should be retired and playing golf and getting a tan in Florida, but I can't get this out of my system.
There you go. Well, I hope that I have that same, feeling and vigor for it when I'm your age. So I admire that, and it's very impressive. If, people wanted to learn more about you and what you do, and, maybe even be on the lookout for a novel coming out soon, what can they look for and where can they find it?
So I'm still a partner at Domain Associates. Domain Associates is on the internet, and they can email me at dovey@domainvc.com, and I'll try to answer. I try to answer everything that comes in best I can.
There you go. Awesome, Brian. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Peyton. Appreciate the opportunity.